Are you ready to explore the concrete jungles where dreams are made? Then you've come to the right place as we're exploring the North American touring production of Hell's Kitchen on this episode of the BSB podcast. Hell's Kitchen recently arrived in the 313 as one of Broadway Detroit's shows this season, and we're excited to break down the story and characters from this Alicia Keys inspired show. But before we dive into the story and characters, like, follow, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms at Boxy Babes. Spoiler warning. If you haven't fallen for Hell's Kitchen yet and want to see it without no one else's thoughts on the show, then pause this episode and come back once you've seen this musical. If you're still here, let's get right into it. RJ, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm excited to talk about the show for one of two reasons, but we're going to start with a very big confession, is that apparently I didn't know as much Alicia Keys music as I thought I did. I think that's a big takeaway from this show.
I mean, that's that fair.
Did you grow up? I mean, I feel like we're the right age bracket.
Not.
Okay, as I said, we're the right age bracket where you would think that we grew up on Alicia Keys.
Yes and no. Like, I think she might have been a little bit before. Like, there were very specific songs that, and most of them I feel like were either duets or they were publicized because they were in something rather than exclusively following her music. But also, I don't know. I mean, she's considered pop, but also rides that like R&B. Like there's a little bit like it makes sense to me that I wouldn't know everything that she has.
I feel like we both have been slightly traumatized and or we just know Empire State of Mind from just all the times we've been to New York now, and that's pumped into Times Square pretty exclusively. So I feel like we did know that song pretty well. And I feel like there's the hits, like Girl on Fire, Falling, No One. There's quite a few of these major hits. But as we were playing the show, I was like, I didn't realize either that A, she sang this song, or B, that this song, like I didn't, or Alicia Keys had this song. You know what I mean? So I feel like that was quite an eye opener of like, I thought I was really into pop music back in the day. I thought I was a pop girly, so to speak, but apparently not as much as I originally thought I was.
Well, and that could be said for probably more artists that you do enjoy than you think because they have such a massive discography. There's no way. I mean, even we know that my fave is Kelly Clarkson, right? But there are songs that I definitely do not know of hers, because she has how many albums. So it's just, yeah, it's the name of the game musically. You're gonna like some stuff. You're not gonna come across some other stuff. You have the mega hits. You have the ones that slipped under the radar.
I was going to say, we just recently encountered this with Kelly Clarkson when I told you what my favorite song was, and you had never heard of it. And you were like, that must be one of her new songs. And I was like, nope, it's been around for over a decade. So that being said, we're going to jump into the show, Hell's Kitchen. Basically, it's a semi-autobiographical story of Alicia Keys' life, obviously dramatized for the stage. Things are changed. It's not 100% real. But from when I was talking with Roz White, who plays Miss Liza Jane, she was mentioning that this is like the brainchild of Alicia Keys. And I feel like it, just general thoughts, it kind of lived up to what I expected Alicia Keys' show to be. Like, I could see Alicia Keys in the main star. I could see it in the story. Did you feel, from what you know of Alicia Keys, did you feel her kind of in the show as we were kind of sitting there getting ready to see it and as the show started?
Yeah, I mean everything about the production value, uh, presentation value, I guess, said Alicia Keys immediately from just the everything that you saw, um, from costuming to choreo to obviously the music. But yeah, definitely a very stamp. You knew exactly on the first downbeat. Basically, you knew what the vibe was going to be.
And so when I was doing some research for this, the book was done by Christopher Diaz, who the only thing that I could really find on him theater-wise was one called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity. And then he adapted Rent for Fox in Rent Live. And so like this is relatively an interesting story because he's newer to the scene of theater. He's worked with like FX and stuff on shows, but I thought that was interesting because I guess I wonder, do you feel like the story structure I think that we have to start there because this has a very interesting structure. It was a story that's kind of told and narrated by Allie, where it almost felt like there was another narrator that's supposed to be narrating it, but Allie was kind of narrating her own life. Did you? What did you think of the structure of Hell's Kitchen?
Um, I not to start it off on a sour note, but I thought it was the weakest part of the show.
Correct.
Um, it just, yeah, to your point, it felt like a lot for one person, especially the person who was not only narrating but living the, it's lived through lived experience. And it was a little bit bizarre to me that she was the only narrator when she wasn't the only lead. Like it felt like you could have leaned into making some of the other characters' perspectives. Um, like we were getting some perspective from her mother, but then we didn't get the narration from her mother. We only got through Allie's lens. So yeah, it kind of felt weighed unevenly in that sense.
I had heard that at early times in this like development of the story that there was actually a narrator that narrated the story. So I'm thinking more along the lines of, do you remember Neil Diamond, A Beautiful Noise, where he was like almost narrating the story, telling it to a therapist, and the therapist and them were having a conversation. I don't think it was set up like that, but I feel like I would, from what I understand, there was like a third party that was kind of telling the story, like older Allie. And I feel like for when they came to the show, it was kind of they stuck those two together, and I was like, okay, did it meld well correctly? Because why is somebody narrating her story when she's living it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I can see why they would have removed that. It bounces so much. There's so many. I mean, obviously, the main theme is her life, not even her life, 1 year of her life. But to then have that scoped by somebody else, I'm not sure. Like, I think they probably did it the best way that they could have with how the book is written. But yeah, some alterations either way.
You had mentioned that this was the weakest aspect. Is there something specific you didn't like about the story, or just like the way that it was set up like that?
There's just a lot. Like, I feel like we dug a lot of holes and we only got out of like one of them. Um, there's just so many kind of like subplot lines. They were trying to tackle many things. And of course, because life is hard and complicated and they wanted to, I'm sure, put in as much music as they could. And you kind of when you do that, and that's why I struggle so hard with jukebox musicals, because you're trying to utilize the songs, but kind of almost force them to have a meaning that maybe they didn't initially have. And then you have to create a plot built around that as well, even if it feels like the plot is going like snaking all over the place. Um, or maybe a better analogy would be a tree. Like I felt like we had one kind of solid direction going up, but then there were all of these branches and none of them ultimately developed. Um, none of them grew leaves per se because there was too many. Um, and yeah, it was a little bit kind of like jerk jerking to this characterization and this plot, and then we're back over here. Um, I couldn't tell where I was supposed to be focused. Am I focused on friends and friendship? Am I focused on family? Am I focused on professional development and what eventually becomes, this relationship with music, which is what I would have thought the primary goal of the show was. But I don't know. It didn't feel that way for me. But I'm curious to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
So, I still want to start off real quick and just say that when you talk about like the way jukebox musicals are made, I always think of Glee season one and season two because season one felt a lot more organic, where season two, it felt like we have the songs we want, we just have to shoehorn them in somehow. And like, it doesn't always serve the story, it serves the song. And like, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But there was a few and this is gonna be blasphemous for me to say because you know how much I love that song, but the one where she's pawn it all. When it began, I was like, where are we going? Like she's like begging them to like pay for the father to go away, and at first it felt a little awkward. And by the time we got to the end, I didn't care anymore because like that song is just so awesome. But there was a moment where I was like, okay, where is this going? How is this fitting in here? How is like it felt a little bit like a puzzle where some of the like a kid that's shoving the pieces together. You're trying to put the pieces together to make the photo, and it's there. You can kind of see that it's a dog, but you know. So I want to. I'm gonna start there, but I agree with the fact that there was a lot going on. I mean, when I was writing up this face sheet for the two of us, as you can see, I have 4 or 5 different points just story wise, and none of them like intersect or fully developed. So, take a step back. Allie is 17, living with her mother in Hell's Kitchen. Her dad's not around. That's important later. We'll come back to that. But truthfully, this felt like the first part of it was all about love. She was looking to find love. She wanted to find a boyfriend. She was, she found Nuck. She kind of pursued Nuck in a very kind of stalkerish way for a little bit there. She ends up getting Nuck. And then there's family. So you have the struggle between Ellie and her mom and her dad who's absent and comes back. And then you do have the legacy aspect. So you have the music with Liza Chain. And what does it mean to leave a piece of yourself in this world? And it felt like we were playing tonal whiplash a little bit. We're going to go over here. We're going to sing this love song real quick, but then we got to go back and be reminded that we need to play piano, and also that we're mad at our mom and that dad's coming back. And there was a little bit of that pull that and I get what they were doing, but I almost feel like I needed more of the story to flesh it out because there was just, and correct me if I'm wrong, they used the elevator as the shift, but it was like not enough time to switch between the tones. I don't know. I'm probably rambling at this point. I liked it, but like also at the same time, I feel like there was something that was missing in the way that the story was structured.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I and let me just say, as we're nitpicking and tearing the plots apart a little bit, like the show itself, the way that it was performed was very, very good. Um, but the plot was almost distracting. Like I was anticipating going in, having not known anything aside from obviously it's an Alicia Keys musical, that it was going to be about her music, like about her that legacy piece. And I feel like that was it was like the subplot of the subplot of the subplot. Um, and yes, part of it is supposed to show us that music was her escape and she developed it and she was very talented naturally. Um, but the scenes that those scenes were so short and so basically just saying, which is very true to when you learn piano, practice, 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 right? Just sit down and practice. That's the only way you're going to get this. Um, but I feel like there could have been more. Uh, and maybe it's just because we were only covering such a short period of time. Um, but yeah, I was wanting more specifically from that plot. I feel like we could have taken away from the father storyline. I don't really
Correct.
know how that added. Like I understand he was absent and then he was kind of leading him on and absent again, but I feel like you could have had the same outcome if you had just taken that entire piece out. Um
I'm gonna take a step further, and I'm sorry, listeners, if you are gonna be upset about this. I think that not only could you take it have shortened down the dad part, I think that the storyline with Nuck also could have been shortened down a lot. There was a significant amount of time in that beginning there where she is pursuing this guy and he does not want her. And I feel like we had 3 or 4 scenes that were the exact same scene over and over and over again of her showing up somewhere. He didn't want her. She felt rejected. She was awkward. She walked away. She came back. And I get it. Like, it was trying to show like you're kind of wearing somebody down. Again, as a psychologist, I was just like, okay, first off, this feels a little bit like a red flag. Let's talk about it. Let's come to therapy and really work on this. And so, like, part of that is the storyline with the dad. I get that. Like, I understand. But I feel like those 2 pieces were really not the essential part. And when I talked to Roz White, who plays Miss Liza Jane, she mentioned that she's only on stage for 18 minutes, and that's including the finale. That should have been one of the bigger things, because one of the scenes that I love the most, spoiler people, I already gave you spoiler, but one of the scenes I love the most is the scene between the mom and Miss Liza Jane, where the mom's like, I don't want her spending so much time down here. And Liza Jane's like, I don't have time. And I feel like I cried like a baby, as you know. I also knew what was coming because I had talked to, Roz White. I feel like there should have been more of a lead up to that moment so that people would have been more emotionally connected to that storyline. Because I think that is the storyline, the thread that made the most sense for an Alicia Keys show in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Um, it just, yeah, I would have loved to see more of that. I mean, and at the end, we get ultimately like that funeral scene, and I would have loved to have more interaction with those experiences that they cite during that scene, um, rather than, yeah, the 3 or 4 scenes with Nuck. Um,
Because it makes me
especially
wonder.
like the age thing, like I don't know. There was just a lot of gap. I was like trying to figure out, what are you trying to say? Um, because there's a they don't really say they don't say how old he is. They keep referring to him as a man. Then he learns that she's 17, underage, supposedly, which makes you assume he's over
Of age.
18.
Right.
Um, and I'm like, okay, they made a big deal about that, but it wasn't really important. I mean, it was important in the fact that it like pisses off her mother even more, but it really didn't. Yeah, didn't
It
play into anything else.
it almost felt like the Nuck storyline was leading to the fact, and I get what the message they're trying to say, of the mom calling the cops on him and how that was wrong, and the mom was kind of beating herself up, which I understand, but I feel like you also didn't have to you didn't have to have as much storyline there to get to that point, if that makes sense. Like, the mom would have known regardless, having a biracial daughter, having, being in love with a person of color, having friends who were also, black and Hispanic. Like, there was all of these storylines where she would have known what she did was wrong, but she thought she was doing the right thing for her daughter. And like, you could have had that storyline without having to dive so into that. And also, like, in my head, I was like, did he never question how old she was? Like,
Right. Well, and we never saw that. Like, it was that piece didn't really. They tried to make it feel shocking, but it wasn't, because there was never a conversation about it. So it wasn't like she lied. Um, or if she did, it was, happened off stage. Didn't happen in
right.
front of us. And yeah, I mean, I get the mom being. I get that they were trying to bring in kind of racial discrimination, bringing that to the forefront. Um, but I agree. I don't think we needed 3 or 4 scenes. Like, basically from the first scene that we see them, that's happening. So yeah, I don't know. Um, but I mean, again, this could be, if I dive deeper, maybe it was based on a very specific situation that Alicia went through, and she wanted to include it. I'm assuming that's why so many of these pieces feel a little bit disjointed, is because obviously to her, if they were very formative, like,
Correct.
she wanted to include it. And that's only what I can assume, obviously, when she's the one. I'm assuming, if she named as a producer on the show, or
Yeah, she was very involved in the process.
yeah. So I'm sure. But the only other thing I'll mention, I feel like I keep derailing us, but
You're
the,
okay.
the projections on the back during all of the scenes that were more ballady, not even ballady. I don't know if you know, but like, when we talk about the racial discrimination, we saw projections of like, whether it was
Yeah.
police brutality, or whatever the thing was, a certain march. Um, when we were originally talking about female pianists,
Hmm.
those were projected. So there, I understand and appreciated some of what they were trying to do, but it did feel like a lot. Like I wasn't sure where my focus was supposed to be, but I understand that they were trying to tell us where her inspirations were coming from. So,
I will say this: the song you're talking about the one that I caught it right away, was "Perfect Way to Die," which is what ends that first act, and it's where Miss Liza Jane is playing at the piano and being like, "These are the people who've come before you who have lost their lives because of this fight," And so I caught that, and I was like, that almost seemed like a more interesting way to talk about it than I think the police showed up 4 or 5 times. And again, it felt like some of these scenes were starting to get repetitive. And I was like, but that when Miss Liza Jane came in and when she was singing about it and they were showing in the back scene, I was like, that makes sense. That was a good connection. That was something that I absolutely loved. And as you know, I was a mess after that one, and we're not going to talk about it. Um, but we really truly feel we spend so much time with Nuck that I feel like you could have gotten that same storyline from everybody else, but most importantly, from Miss Liza Jane. Like I feel like that was the key. That should have been almost the person, the thread that really connected this story from start to finish.
yeah, agreed. I would have liked to see more there.
And I'm gonna say this: I feel like this is also, and we still have more to talk about the story, but I feel like this is why I understand why it didn't win Best Musical, yet won for Best Performances. I feel like that was as soon as I was seeing it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. The pieces were there. I was like, the performances are fantastic. The storyline needs a little more work.
Yeah, I mean the performance valuation is very high. It's a high caliber, high energy on every angle. Vocally, physically, the choreography is insane. Um, but yeah, the acting is also high caliber, but it didn't require like it none of it felt particularly challenging comparatively to the music and the dance.
And I'm going to bring this up in part two as well. But when you're talking about performances, it also, and this is not a slight, audience listeners, this is not a slight against Maya Drake, who played Allie. But it has to be really difficult when you are outshone by both your mom, so Kennedy Calhell, who played her mom, and Roz White, who played Miss Liza Jane, because they acted and sung their butts off in the show. And I think like, the role is more like their roles are more inclined for that. Like the pieces, like you're seeing a mom struggling, like she's actively struggling to try to both understand her 17-year-old daughter and try to protect her. And I mean, I am not a 17-year-old girl, but I've had moments like that with my mom. You know what I mean? And now as an adult, I can see that like, oh, my mom was trying her best. Or my mom didn't understand where I was coming from, but she at least tried to meet me in the middle. And so like, there was a lot of this where I was just like, like their parts, Jersey, her mom, and Miss Liza Jane were almost more intriguing to me as characters than Allie, because Allie just felt, this is going to be my analogy, but I think people are going to get it. It reminded me of like the fifth Harry Potter book, where Harry Potter's just so hard to listen to because he's a 15-year-old whiny brat sometimes. And not calling Allie a brat, but she's very stubborn. She's very young. She's very naive. And so her character almost felt off putting at times because now I'm of an age where I could relate to the mom and to Miss Liza Jane a lot more than I could to Allie.
Well, yeah, and I think that emotional dissonance of the Ally character, like you get the typical like you said, kind of naive, um, immature, love struck songs out of her, right? That are still fairly difficult, but less emotionally charged. They're more the fun, like I'm hanging out with my friends, I'm doing what I want. Um, but then you have the two. I consider them both motherly characters. Um, but with Jersey and Liza Jane, where they just are doing power ballad slash. I mean, I don't. I'm not even sure what genre to lay those into, but just powerhouse numbers that literally bring the house down because they are their whole body is into what they literally have to physically use their entire body because of the amount of energy that it's taking to express what the song is requiring. Um, and comparatively to just like Allie doing a couple fun vocal runs, right? Very Alicia Keys style, which is still very difficult, by the way. But it
Correct.
is just that the difference of like a mature woman uh, with a broken heart versus like a 17-year-old who's like bopping down the street, two very different things.
Sure.
Performance wise, I think it's very for anyone above the age of 17, probably easier to relate to the mother figures comparatively to Allie.
For sure. And like even like there was moments where she's like when Allie's mom's talking to Allie's dad Davis, and I'm just like we've all had to talk to people in our lives, or we've all been in relationships as an adults where we're just like this is it might feel good now, but it's not good for anybody here. And like so there were so many of those aspects. Like, yes, I can remember being 17, I can remember being careless, but it's just like that's also not as an adult who can afford to buy Broadway tickets and go see shows, like that's not the story that I'm always connected to. And so I would have loved to see more of those mature storylines that actually, because if you think about it, this story was about Allie growing and maturing as a person. She's going from almost a child to an adult because she lost somebody very important. She came to terms with the fact that her dad wasn't as good as he was. Her mom, she finally recognized all the things the mom had to do. She had her heart broken for the first time. Like, and I get where those pieces are going. We spent so much time on the love aspect, which I'm sure a lot of people love that. I'm sure that's selling a lot of tickets. I would have just loved to see more of some of these other older characters because that was what connected to me.
Agreed.
And so with that, we are actually done with part 1, but stay tuned for part 2 of our Hell's Kitchen discussion right here on the BSB podcast. Thanks again for joining us here in our box seats. Until next curtain call.